We're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad is at the control, and we're with you here for 1 hour. And today, in the world of info, we are presenting the world of books. And the world of books today has two very interesting books that really deserve to be read. And both books have the same, almost same title. The first book is Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy, yes, the ex-president of and the deceased president of the United States. And the second book is Profiles of Cairo in 1000 Years by Gamal al-Ghitani. Really interesting two books, and you know the rule of the game. I will always, since I have consumed a lot of time, give you my suggestion. Should you read this book, skim it or toss it? And usually my advice is to read this book, never to skip it. And yes, today we are going in the world of info among books. Let's start right away with the first book, Profiles in Courage. Profiles in Courage is a Pulitzer Prize-winning book written by John Kennedy. It was published in 1956. Before we go into the details of this interesting book, we have to talk for a while about John Kennedy. Well, John Kennedy is one of 9 brothers and sisters who are the children of Joseph Kennedy. Joseph Kennedy was a very well-known rich businessman who entered into politics and was living in Boston and had his role as working as a governor and part of this. He had some alliance with President Roosevelt, and he was coming from the Democratic Party. Well, Roosevelt found in him maybe a sort of a competitor or a sort of an ally, but anyway, he decided to send him as the ambassador to the UK in a very critical period of time in the years 1938, 1939. And you know, this critical period is this period where the World War II seemed to be very inevitable, even with the trials of Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, to delay the war or prevent it almost. And unfortunately, this did not work. So, Joseph Kennedy was the first American ambassador to the UK of an Irish descent. And yes, he was a proud Catholic and a proud Irish descent gentleman. So definitely, you know, the sort of friction between Ireland, between the Irish people and the British, as the British are looking to them as part of their empire, and the Irish were involved in a war of independence, which was really not far away at that period from the early 1920, 21. So let's talk about Joseph Kennedy when he came to Britain as the ambassador and starting a goodwill relation with Chamberlain and, of course, with Churchill afterwards. However, when we talk about Joseph Kennedy and his ambitions for his sons to reach an important status in the world of politics, his first son, Joseph Kennedy, he was junior, he was grooming him to become the president of the United States, asking him to go into politics. The second one was John Kennedy, and John Kennedy, since he was second in line, so Joseph thought that he could go into the field of being a writer, a laureate, a novelist, or a politician, or a writer in political thought. He never thought of him in the job of a politician because he put all his bets on Joseph Kennedy. Unfortunately, this went into wrong way because Joseph Kennedy Jr. died in an air crash during his involvement in World War II. So it was up to Joseph Kennedy to transfer the pole of the flag to his son, the second in command, John. John at that time was doing good with his life. First of all, he graduated from Boston, from Harvard University, and his thesis that he had written in his senior year was about the politics of Britain, and he has transformed this thesis into a book. And this book was called While Britain Was Asleep, or something like that, which deals with the fact that while Britain was not really interested, Germany started arming itself, building a strong army and air force, and therefore bringing in the peace of the world into a great jeopardy. So, with this book, which he published with the aid of one of the famous writers, the book was published and was a bestseller because the topic was very interesting. However, John Kennedy was involved in World War II as a Navy officer and a commander of a torpedo boat that was sunk by the Japanese Air Force. And he jumped from the boat with his rest of his crew and was able to save them and give them a sort of courageous help that they were able to be saved by the American Navy afterwards. John Kennedy got an injury in his back at this accident, and he suffered from pains in his back. Later on, John Kennedy entered into politics and became a senator in the United States Senate. In 1954-1955, he turned to do surgery for his back ailment, and it took him some time to recover. So this, during the period of his recovery from this ailment, he decided that he is going to go into different aspects of pain. So he decided that he would consume more time in building up a book about very famous senators in the Senate. These senators had something, all of them, there were 7 of them, and it profiles, or 8 of them, it profiles 8 United States senators who demonstrated exceptional courage and integrity by taking stands that were unpopular or went against the grain of their political parties or constituents. These individuals risked their careers and reputation to do what they believed was right for the nation. And this is really very interesting to know, because these young people, or these senators, went against the current and lost their popularity with their constituents or with their colleagues, and even jeopardized their political career. And for this, John Kennedy thought that these people really deserve to be called brave people, courageous people, people with principles. And when we talk about these different 8 senators, we'll talk about the first one, and this is John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts was a very special senator because his job was, or his CV is very rich. First of all, he's the son of one of the American presidents and one of the founding fathers of the United States. And as a favorite son of John Quincy, his name also is John Quincy Adams, he has proved himself in the field of diplomacy by being a diplomat in Europe, in the field of the Secretary of State, and then entered into the Senate. And during his tenure in the Senate in the year 1808, he was stunned by knowing the fact that his state of election, that is New England, was making a lot of trade with Britain. And this trade helps Britain to improve its status, and at the same time weakens the economic power of the new United States of America. So he decided to go behind a decision of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, the president of the United States at that time, who decided to have an embargo on any exports and imports from the UK. And this was a great catastrophe for the economy of New England, and therefore he gained their lack of confidence, if we use the expression, of his constituents, and he was forced to retire from his seat in the Senate. He had a comeback later on by being elected as a president, because it was known that what he did was from the first of the national love of the country. And at the same time, we know that the Britain tried to get into war with the United States again in 1812, and they were defeated. And therefore, it was known that he did this action in sort of love of the country, not just for any personal reason. He later on became a president of the United States. He only had one term, but after that, he joined the Congress, and during his tenure in the Congress, he was trying until he died in the mid 1840s. He tried as much as possible to do abolition of the slavery and tried to be against the world of slaves. So he deserves the commendation that was put by John Kennedy in this book. And the second gentleman, that is Daniel Webster, is definitely another guy who tried to prevent the occurrence of the Civil War by making the Compromise of 1850. So his speech, the Constitution of the Union, alienated abolitionist allies in the North, but temporarily delayed civil war. So he was from the North, and he tried as much as possible to do a compromise with the South to prevent the occurrence of the Civil War. And therefore, he deserved the scrutiny of the people of the North because he tried to do a compromise between the slave-loving states, if we use the expression of the South, and the North, and by supporting the act of the fugitive slaves. If the slaves get to escape from their owners, they will have to return. Of course, this was a very mean act from him, but his aim was to save the country from a civil war. The third guy is Benetton. He's a Democrat from Missouri. He fought against the Kansas-Nebraska Act and refused to align with pro-slavery Missouri Democrats. And this can definitely tell us that he, as a slave owner, decided to work against his own personal interest by attacking the Slavery Act, and he lost his Senate seat in 1851 because of that. The other guy is Sam Houston, who is a Democrat from Texas. He opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which threatened to spread slavery, and refused to support Texas secession from the Union. And he was removed as a governor in 1861 for his Unionist stance. So he decided to go against his constituents, aiming to stay the state of the Union between the states of the South and to the North. Coming from Texas, he should have supported the slavery. He should have supported the secession of Texas from the United States, but he did not. He sacrificed his seat as a governor for this Union stance. Now the other guy is Ross. Edmund Ross. He cast a decisive vote against impeaching President Andrew Johnson. You know, the President Andrew Johnson was the one who took the helm after the assassination of Lincoln. He was considered by a lot of authors and historians as one of the worst presidents of the United States. He was from the South, but he supported the North. But later on, when he became the president, he tried to make as much as possible reconciliation between the North and the South. And therefore, he was attacked vigorously by a lot of the United States senators, and they wanted to make an impeachment. The vote of Edmund Ross was the vote that really put the impeachment away from his neck. And therefore, he defended Johnson, in spite of the fact that he was not that much convinced, but he didn't want a president of the United States to be impeached. And of course, he suffered and lost his seat because of that. The other guy is Lamar, and Lamar was a Democrat from Mississippi, and he has urged the reconciliation with the North, between the North and the South. And at the same time, he wanted to work against the discrimination laws against Black Americans. And this did not put him into great admiration by his own constituents, who preferred that these laws should not be abolished. One of the last senators in this is George Norris, and he defied his party to oppose the Speaker, Joseph Cannon, who was an autocratic ruler in the Senate in 1910. And he said that this gentleman, or the Speaker of the House, should not have authority on the members of the Senate. And this led to a strong independence of the senators later on and decreased the powers of the Speaker. And this was really appreciated. Although he lost the sympathy of his colleagues and, of course, of the speakers. The last but not least was Robert Taft. Robert Taft was the son of President Taft. President Taft was President of the United States after Theodore Roosevelt. He stayed from 1908 till 1912. He had only one term, but later on became the judge in the Supreme Court, and he enjoyed his place as the President of the Supreme Court. However, Robert Taft, his son, was into politics, and he was a great senator, always had an eye to become a president of the United States. He failed to gain the popularity when in 1946 he decided to go against the Nuremberg trials. He said that there are a lot of lack of justice if it will be the justice of the victorious over the defeated. Of course, what he has done definitely has established the morality of the cause of him, and at the same time established a lot of hatred from all the people who were involved in the war, the victims of the Holocaust, the people who suffered from World War II, the ones who lost their loved ones in this war, said that this war was caused by the tyranny of the Nazis and by the unjustified act of war and the unjustified crimes of war that they committed. And therefore they should deserve to have these Nuremberg trials with extraordinary laws that facilitate the getting of the revenge from these criminals, because they have made crimes against humanity. So this is the book. The book is interesting. The book is carrying a lot of information, and at the same time, it is definitely a good historical book. And claiming by this, John Kennedy has claimed a lot of notoriety. Notoriety means that he was becoming a very famous senator, because the picture or the profile that he has exported to all the people is that he was a cultured man. Especially that the book has won the appreciation of the Pulitzer and won him a Pulitzer Prize. And at the same time, gained him a place as a sort of an idealistic person who claims that the principles should be better to be followed than the personal interests of a politician. And he gave these 8 examples. But there are certain 2 drawbacks of this book. The first drawback, which is definitely of very great interest, is that he was helped in this book by his speechwriters, Dan Sorensen. Dan Sorensen is a very good editor, is a very good writer, and he was later on the speechwriter of President John Kennedy. And he said that Sorensen helped him in the book, but all the ideas and the prose is his own book. He said that Sorensen helped him in the research. However, the rumors have it that it was not just the research, but it's the own prose of Sorensen is the one which produced this likable nature of reading and easy reading. When you read this book, you'll find that it goes and passes easily, flawless, all through the lines. You spend less time in reading it because it is so edible, if we use the expression. So this is the important point. The second important point is that it has established the position of John Kennedy as a thinker, as a philosopher, as a brave and a courageous man. But how did John Kennedy fare in the Senate? Was he somebody who's preferring his principles than his own interests? Well, actually, some people accuse him that he distanced himself from the movement of the liberation of the black people, and didn't give them the whole rights or support during his tenure in the Senate. He didn't give the support to people at that time to get their own independence from the tyranny of the white people on them, and he was not that great support of their civil rights. And after he became the president, he supported it verbally, but didn't support it in law. And this gives some of the drawbacks. They say that he would have done that, but it was up to Johnson who would sign the Civil Rights Act later on during his tenure as a president, replacing John Kennedy. This is another important point. But they say that the courageous activity of John Kennedy was the one that has been shown during the great Cuba missiles problem that happened, and how he acted very presidential, very courageously, and did not get back, or did not blink in front of Khrushchev when I asked him, you should remove these rockets on the spot, or a World War III will erupt. And this shows that he has respected the principles of the West and the principles of the world and the principles of a victorious country that has spent a lot of its efforts and money and people in World War II to give or to submit for the Soviet Union. So this is the point of controversy. But how far did Kennedy go with this book? How far he has produced his legacy, or has increased his legacy? So first of all, the Pulitzer Prize has boosted his national profile, as I said. The cultural influence, the phrase profile in courage, entered political lexicon as a shorthand for principled defiance. And there is a Profiles in Courage Award, which was established by the Kennedy family in 1990 to honor modern public servants who demonstrate bravery. So when we talk about this particular book, we have to go into its historical context. The book was published during the Cold War and the McCarthy era, a time when political conformity was often enforced. Kennedy's emphasis on courage resonated with Americans grappling with the issue like civil rights and anti-communist hysteria. So his wordings supported the Americans, acted as a sort of an illuminating the path, saying for the civil rights and the anti-communist hysteria that happened from McCarthy, found these people who found that this was very offensive, found in the book that it was having a soothing effect on them. And of course, in Kennedy's own career, it's the complexity of political courage in practice has shown that he was into the civil rights approach, but he was afraid to indulge himself as a great defender, afraid to lose a lot of votes if he goes into presidency later on. So this is how the book has affected John Kennedy's life and legacy. And of course, we can always find that this book has definitely left its impact on John Kennedy and the world itself. So, Profiles in Courage, a book that definitely has an important place in the world of literature, and also it has its own educational impact, that the book is widely taught in schools, ensuring that Kennedy's ideas about leadership endure in American civil conditions. So the controversies and criticism we have just discussed, and simply we can see that a book like this deserves to be read, but to be read with the perspective as a food for thought. So you're still listening to the world of books, coming from the world of info, and my name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad is still at the control. Stay tuned to us. Listening to the world of info and the world of books. And the second book is a very interesting book, and it carries almost the same title. It's called Profiles, but this time it's Profiles of Cairo in 1000 Years by Gamal Ghitani. And yes, Gamal Ghitani is definitely a very interesting gentleman. He's a writer, he's a journalist, and he is a gentleman who has a strong love affair with Cairo. He lived all through his life of Cairo in Old Cairo. He didn't just live there, but he lived through its historical periods and places, and has seen a lot. For a very long years, and for a very long time, he has been always into the history of Cairo, living it day by day, transferring the wealth of his information to the public through his talks that he used to make on the television, and through his books that he used to write with great, beautiful prose. And definitely, a great literature laureate who you really would love to read him to talk to you about Cairo. He does not just describe the stone, but he always mentions the history behind the stone. He takes you through his informative mind through different pages of history, takes you to the different mosques and different sabils, different kutabs, different streets, palaces, houses, and tells you with the great history that he's carrying on his shoulder all you need to know, the old mother of the world. When we talk about Gamal Ghitani, we can talk for hours. But when we discuss this beautiful book that I here have, that it's 13th edition, and I believe it has been published more and more after that. This is January 2020, so I believe it has been published even in more timing. When we talk about this book, we'll find that the chapters of the book takes you through different periods of time. First of all, he would take you through the coffee shops of Cairo, not only mentioning you the story of how these coffee shops started, how people started getting interest into coffee and tea, and how the smoking found its way, whether this was tobacco or sometimes the illegal hash, and how the governors in the beginning, especially during the Fatima period, were against completely smoking by its different and bad perspectives, and how people were doing and faring in different coffee shops, and how these coffee shops have matured into what we can see today in the very recent views, and how we have seen some of these coffee shops, like the Fishawi coffee shop that has been open for hundreds of years living, and how people like Naguib Mahfouz found their remorse and their peace of mind in different coffee shops of Cairo. Of course, as we go through these different places, he goes through us and tells us about not just different coffee shops, but about different characters in history. Like, for example, the Darwish by the name of Ali, who's going around the streets of Old Cairo near Sayyidina al-Hussein Mosque. And of course, he's telling us about the turbans of the Mamluks and what types of turbans they are reflecting. He tells us about the different souks of the old Cairo, how he goes around and shows us what is there. And he takes our hand to the Mosque of Mu'ayyad. And Mosque of Mu'ayyad, one of the very important and beautiful mosques that was built by one of the most controversial Mamluks in Egypt. The man who was extremely pious and very kind-hearted is the same man who was thrown into jail where the mosque is now, and the one who has promised God that if he is going to release from this jail, he's going to replace this jail by a mosque. And he kept this promise when he came out by a miracle from this prison and destroyed, and not only regained his authority as a prince, but he became the sultan. And the first decision was to demolish this prison, ill-reputed prison, and replace it with his beautiful mosque. But it didn't take him a single minute of remorse not to steal the main gate of the mosque from the gate of the Sultan Hassan Mosque, because it is more beautiful and carrying a lot of emblems of beautiful artwork. And it is the same guy who decided to build the two minarets on top of the gate of Zuwayla, and of course they give a very beautiful appearance of Cairo. But it is the same gentleman who felt very much jealous of his own son, his own flesh and blood, of his own crown prince, that when he came victorious from one of the conquests in near Syria and Turkey, he ordered the killing of his son, yes, the assassination of his son. And later on he regretted this assassination and died very shortly after the death of his son. So this is another story of a mosque and a man. Another mosque is the masjid or the mosque of Al-Hakim Amrillah, the most controversial ruler of Egypt through history. A guy who has turned always completely 180 degrees in different positions. Sometimes he is so much pro-Copts and pro-Christians that he is very kind to them. And later on, in a very short period, he becomes against them and force all the Christians to become Muslim, which of course was reversed later on by the governor who came after him. A man who prevented ladies from wearing shoes so that they don't go around the streets producing a lot of mishaps to the males. Of course, the man was definitely schizophrenic. And how did he disappear? And how nobody found his body? And how somebody thought that this man is definitely having a place in the hearts of the Egyptians up till now, or hearts of some of his followers up till now, of the Druze. Another mosque, which is definitely an important mosque, is that of Sultan Hassan, and the controversy between the different size of the minarets. He doesn't leave us before going to the houses, the old houses of Cairo, as he goes through them and tell us how these houses were beautifully built. And definitely we go back where the Muayyad Sheikh Mosque was and tell us about all the secrets of the bloody gate of Cairo, and that is Bab Zuwayla, or the gate of Zuwayla, the one that has seen the condemning to death of a lot of people, of how people are condemned to death are hung on this wall of on the gate of Zuwayla, including one of the most important dear persons to the Egyptians, and that is Tumambay II, the last Sultan of Egypt, of the Mamluk Sultan, who Sultan Selim al-Awwal decided that he is going to behead him and kill him because he defended his rights and defended his country. And of course, he goes and takes us to the Sultan Ghuri court, and how he was very much interested in listening to the people and getting more culture and more education. Of course, when we go through the different walls and the different gates of Cairo, we find always Gamal al-Ghitani taking us by our hand to see this pretty place in Cairo. And he had a full chapter for the Quran, the rare Quran prints in Cairo. And he tells us about how these trophies are found, which were carefully written on beautiful paper and with beautiful writing, whether this is using gold or very precious inks. He says that we have also a copy of Osman ibn Affan, the famous Khalif, and one of the great friends of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. His own Quran is there, and there is the Quran of Sultan Brisbay and of Qaitbay as well. All these are present in a very special place in Cairo and in the Islamic Museum of Cairo and Dar al-Wasaiq al-Khomeini. Of course, this gives us an idea how these great, beautiful trophies were found and well kept through times. He leaves us with the famous street of Al-Mu'izz al-Din Street, the street that really extends for almost 3 kilometers and a half from Bab al-Nasr and Bab al-Futuh to Bab Zuwayla, and has among it almost 1/3 of the Islamic monuments of Cairo. You can see it in this open museum. The types of the Sabils and the Kutabs, and the ideas that everybody who governed Egypt wants to leave a trace in Shara al-Mu'izz al-Din Street, just simply to say to the others, I've been here before you. I'm placing my mosque or my school or my Sabil here in front of you to show you how I was able to solve it all. I was able to change the history. And at the same time, we see how these people acted in a different way. For example, we see that the Salih Najmuddin Ayyub, the famous last king of the Ayyubid dynasty, when he built his mausoleum, his school, and later on this place was changed into the important courtyard for the 4 judges for a very long time. So Salih Najmuddin, when he built this in the middle of Al-Mu'izz al-Din Street, we find that his Mamluks, who are the Salihi Mamluks, as they are usually called, decided to build their own schools and their own mosques right next to their master. We can see Zahir Babers building his school and mosque beside Salih Najmuddin. Unfortunately, this place has been destroyed in the 19th century. That is of the school of Babers. But we can see as well, right in front of Salih Najmuddin mausoleum, the mausoleum and the school and the hospital and the mosque of Qalawun. Sultan Qalawun, who came up to the throne in the year 1282 and stayed there until 1291, has built his beautiful complex and a beautiful hospital that is still working up till now. Now it's been working for almost 800 years and still functioning as a hospital. And this hospital, he has given a lot of endowments so that it stays and gives proper food and even amusement of musicians playing for the sick people inside this. And of course, the beautiful mausoleum that looks like the mausoleum of, or looks like the dome, the rocket dome in Jerusalem. And the mosque and the school and the Sabil. Beside him, right beside him, is where Nasr Muhammad, the son of Qalawun, decided to build his own complex just in the walls of his father in front of Salih Najmuddin Ayyub. And this beautiful complex of Qalawun, of Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun, has a gate which has been dismantled from the gate of the cathedral of Acre after it has fallen in the hands of his elder brother Khalid ibn Qalawun in the year 1291, which marks the year of the end of the Crusaders' presence in the Middle East. When we look at this gate that has been dismantled from the church and brought to Egypt, and later on put in place by Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun as a sort of a memorabilia of the end of the Crusades in the Middle East, definitely would make your heart shake and tremble. Beside Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun mosque and complex, we find Mar'uk building his own complex 100 years away from that of Qalawun. Why did he place this in this particular place? Is because Barquq is known to be the founder of the new period of the Mamluk, or the Neo-Mamluk, or what they call them, the Circassian Mamluks, or simply the Borgi Mamluk. And as if he wanted to say that here you can find the history in just 400 meters. You can find Salih Najmuddin Ayyubi, the one who brought the Mamluks to his service, and later on this established the Mamluk rule of Egypt. And in front of Salih Najmuddin, you can find directly in front of him is the Qalawun, the complex of Qalawun, because he has placed this just in front of Salih Najmuddin as a sort of tribute to Salih Najmuddin, and at the same time showing his presence among the sultans. Beside him is the work of Nasr Muhammad, the great builder, especially in his third term as a governor of Egypt, as a sultan. And right next to him is Barquq, delineating the period of the Circassian Mamluks. All this put in just proximity of 500 meters or 400 meters, and showing us the history of Egypt in one of the most important periods of the Egyptian Empire. That is the Mamluk Empire that started in the year 1250 and unfortunately ended in the year 1517. So this marks almost 267 years has happened in this period, and it is shown in a very close proximity to each other. We can see the palaces around, we can see the sabils, we can see the kutabs, we can see the hammams, like the hammam of Sultan Inal. And even during the Ottoman period, the Abdurrahman Khuda complex of a sabil kutab. The Fatimid mosques, like Al-Hakim Amr Mosque and Al-Aqmar Mosque, the gates and the famous gates of Cairo that were well established and strengthened by the work of Badr Gamali, the important wazir during the Fatimid period. during the Mustansir time. So when we talk about this, we can talk for hours, and we can almost see that this gentleman, Gamal Ghitani, who has taken our hands to this premises, taking us among all these beautiful structures and telling us, come and see for yourself, come and examine for yourself, and come breathe with me the breath of Cairo. And we can see through the books of Naguib Mahfouz that he decided to write to us and keep to us in the memories of Egypt. And Naguib Mahfouz, with the notoriety and fame that he has gained through the years, especially with the Nobel Prize in Literature, this gives him a very important bridgehead of information to the readers, the foreign readers, about Cairo that Naguib Mahfouz lived in the 20th century. Naguib Mahfouz, who was born in the early 20th century and lived among the quarters of around Al-Mu'izz al-Din La Street, and has written his books concerning this important part of history. And even Gamal Ghitani, who was a close friend to Naguib Mahfouz, has written to us that about the places that Naguib Mahfouz have mentioned in his books, how much they are related to the places that you can find and walk to during the time of the 21st century. This book really carries a lot of interesting information. Definitely, this book helps you to find your way through the tunnels of Cairo, if we use the expression. And of course, he would tell us that the Arabs, as they have went, or the Egyptians, as they went through and saw the pyramids from themselves, and they couldn't really read the inscriptions because it was not up till the year 1821-22 when Champollion was able to decipher the hieroglyphics. So for all the people who lived in Egypt, they never understood what is the work of pyramids, why they were built there, what are these temples from. And of course, this gave us an important notion how a lot of people tried to make adventures inside the pyramids, tried to scratch their way in, tried to find the hidden gates, tried to find treasures, but they failed and at the same time could not elaborate. Perhaps one of the most important points of view that you might see in any of these mosques of Cairo, especially the ones that I have just given a mention of, and that is of Salih Najmuddin, or of course of Qalawun and Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun, is what we usually say the borrowing. We should not use the word borrowing as much as it is a bit of stealing. So to get colonnades and pillars to build these magnificent structures in Al-Mu'izz al-Din La Street, the sultans decided to take these pillars, granite pillars, huge pillars, from the temples that were surrounding Egypt and Cairo and Memphis, taking them and placing them not in a chronological point of view, but into a cosmetic point of view, putting these beautiful granite ones. And so we can see complex pillars, whether these are granite pillars that belong to the Old Kingdom, or pillars that carry the lotus and the papyrus carving, or later on with pillars from the Greco-Roman period temples. All these have been put and impregnated in the different mosques that we see around Cairo. The gates of Cairo, although they were kept and made so that the Cairenes would stay inside, later on, because of the urbanization of the places around Cairo, helped us to go through the walls of Cairo and the gates of Cairo in different perspectives and different streets that would take the Mu'izz al-Din La Street further south towards the citadel and takes us through the Khayyamiyya, the famous site of building the different and carving the different places of tents and different sort of closes. As we go through this important period of time, we always say to ourselves, Cairo is a beautiful city. Cairo is definitely the mother of the old world, or is she the mother of the world? Going through Cairo through the eyes and perspectives of Gamal Ghitani definitely are really is definitely a trip that deserves to be taken, a book that deserves to be read, The Profiles of Cairo in 1000 Years by Gamal Ghitani. Stay tuned. You're still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books. And today we have presented to you really two interesting books that deserve to be read. Profiles in Courage, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book written by John Kennedy and published in 1956, a book that really deserves to be read, seeing the perspective and the making of John Kennedy. The second book is by Gamal Ghitani, Profiles of Cairo in 1000 Years, a book that deserves to be read because it takes you through the eyes of the author, an experienced Cairene who lived all his life in Old Cairo and was a great worshipper in its mosques and its temples and in everywhere. His love to Cairo you can see and read through the papers and through the lines that he has carefully knitted. Definitely a book that deserves to be read. And I promise you that we'll come back next week, the same time, same station, on Radio Cairo. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad was at the control. Stay tuned to Radio Cairo, and we'll see you next week.